Erin Schultz is the founder of Her Personal Finance. In 2015, she graduated from Harvard Business School and realized that her and her classmates were better equipped to manage a corporate balance sheet than their own finances. Through her online classes offered in partnership with Mass General Hospital, she has helped hundreds of physicians and research scientists balance paying off student loans with saving for retirement, figure out how much cash to keep on hand, and navigate hospital benefits. Thank you so much for joining me, Eryn.
Thank you for having me, Kristen. It's really exciting to get to be here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. A lot of these How I Market episodes, we talk to different accountants. And that's not really, you don't have like a bookkeeping or tax firm. But there's a lot behind kind of your niche industry that I think a lot of accountants can relate to. And so I wanted to share your story, I guess kind of pick your brain publicly and show that, it's you can take this technical content and present it well. So before I get into all my questions, tell me just a little bit, beyond the bio, your background. How did you find yourself growing an audience on social media with dealing with people's personal finances?
Yes. So as you read, graduated from business school, took my first job working for a retail grocery chain back in Texas, which was kind of a non-conventional first job out of business school. And I realized that the company I was working for had a great 401k match, but not a lot by the way of 401k education. And frankly, not a great 401k itself, in that it was a pretty high fee plan. And as I was hearing my colleagues have questions about pre-tax versus Roth and how much they should be investing, what were the investment options in the 401k, I started to kind of answer those questions and talk as well to my colleagues or my former classmates from business school who had fancy MBAs, and realized they had all the same questions as my colleagues, at a grocery store. And it really just set me on this journey to answer a lot of these questions for myself, but also for others, and to be able to spread that education. I'm kind of a teacher at my heart. That was the first thing that I'd wanted to do in college. And so it led me to start teaching classes. And from there, kind of grew that into, by popular demand, people kept asking me, hey, will you be my financial planner? And I was like, oh, that's not what I do. And eventually said, okay, if enough people are asking me to do this, I should add that as well. And I do a lot of speaking. I realized my bio was really focused on the women in medicine part of what I do, but I also do a lot of speaking to women in tech and also to women in law, and do a lot of speaking at law firms and tech companies as well.
Nice. And I mean, that's the interesting thing is I had the same conversation when I first started in public accounting. One of my coworkers who was, we're both first year associates, we were talking about investing, and she's like, you know how to do that? I was like, I have no, I guess you have to Google it. I think my parents have a guy. I don't know. I'll ask him. And it's there's no, education as far as go to websites like these and research this and put your money, move it from one place to another. No idea how that works. And I remember we had at the firm I was at, they had educational PowerPoints, but it was so incredibly confusing and overwhelming. And I don't think it was super helpful. But I mean, that education is so needed. And so what sort of prompted you to go from just talking with your coworkers to posting on social media?
So I think that I had this vision of trying to build a business and believe that financial education shouldn't be gatekept. It should be accessible to more people. And I think some of the voices that are most famous, like Dave Ramsey, don't really resonate to my generation. And a lot of the questions that people were thinking about were different. I was talking to a lot of women in their late 20s, early 30s, and felt like there weren't enough people speaking to that audience. And so by posting to Instagram, which was where I spent a lot of time on social media myself, I felt like I could reach the audience of people I was trying to reach. And while I was working full time doing something else, kind of experiment and figure out, hey, what are the messages that resonate with people? What is the educational content that people are interested in? And, could this be a business?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, one thing that I noticed you do a lot with your content is you share a lot of like headlines and like this is what's going on in the news. And it's something that I would frankly like to do more in my business, but it takes a lot of time to like not curate that, but find these articles and figure out what your audience likes and doesn't like. How did you get into sharing like news articles? Were you just like looking for content ideas or, was it kind of like, hey, like I shared it once, this did well.
So I was an economics major. I have always enjoyed reading the news. My husband makes fun of me because every morning he hears me say, Alexa, play the Wall Street Journal What's News podcast, which he does not enjoy. So I think that a lot of this was stuff that I was naturally listening to and already engaging with. And it was an opportunity too to share my perspective and I started doing this in March of 2020, really, during the pandemic. And so I think everybody was home with a lot of extra time on their hands, and there were a lot of interesting headlines in the news. And I think that for me, it's something that I'm already naturally doing. And as I've grown my family during this period, the time where I would be nursing my baby in the dark room would be the time that I would share to stories a lot of the current events that were going on, and how that would impact people.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find it difficult to keep that up? I mean, since 2020, that's like going on 5 years.
I enjoy it. And I think if you can build community and you can do something that is fun for you, it will be sustainable. I will say that I have moments where I do more content and moments where I do less content. And right now is frankly a moment that I'm posting less because I was blessed to get to be on a big podcast earlier this year. And out of that had a big number of inbound leads from people who wanted to work with me. And I know we're going to talk later about having a niche and being able to articulate what it is that you do and to whom. But I was able to say very clearly on that podcast who I serve, which is women in medicine, women in tech, or couples in that space where, one of the people in the couple probably fits the prior description. And I also, as a young mom, or not such a young mom, but mom of young kids, I also work a lot with others who are trying to become a parent or who are trying to grow their families, and how do you think about childcare costs? And so I'll say right now I'm not posting as much content, but I think because it is, to answer your original question, I enjoy it and I've built a community of people that I'm engaging with, and I like that part of it. It doesn't feel like work as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I think is so important when it comes to picking a niche is you really have to be obsessed with it where in your free time, you're even willing to listen to those conversations, and hear about their pain points. But that's actually a great transition. Cause my next question was, I mean, when it comes to Instagram, you have a tagline that says helping women in medicine, tech and law take charge of their money. Do you feel like this has helped or hurt your business when it comes to niching?
It definitely helps. I think even in terms of being an expert as a planner, for example, I work a lot with women specifically in academic medicine who are trying to get their student loans forgiven through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. There are a ton of nuances and intricacies specific to public service loan forgiveness, and for example, how to adjust your AGI to reduce your loan payment, which income driven repayment plan to pick, that I have been able to really become an expert in because I see it a lot. And I realize that, I say no as an example to retirees because I'm not an expert at IRMA or how to pick a Medicare plan or thinking even about sequence of withdrawals from retirement accounts. And so by focusing on, and I'd say I'm trying to even be more niche within this of
Yeah.
early mid-career women in medicine, women in tech, women in law, and specifically, like I said before, people who have young children generally as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, so I like that you kind of have like this specific niche because I mean, I have two young kids. My first was an IVF baby My second was, the one that everyone says, "Oh, see, you're fine." Was a surprise baby. Um, and I think you don't really consider that financially, like how that's going to impact you or like how much it costs. You hear it's expensive, but you truly have no idea until like you show up and you're like, oh my gosh, like how am I supposed to afford, all these tests and treatment and like never knowing like when the end is in sight. And then you have the baby and then there's all the expenses for the child. It's like,
Right.
wow, like it's really never ends. But tell me a little bit about like connecting, I guess, on a more personal level. Because I've also, yeah, like I said, I followed you for a while. I know you have sort of like personal stories you um, weave into your work, and it's personal finance. But how, I guess, what's that like for you? Sharing a more personal side in your more professional, I guess, traditional type niche.
Yeah, well, I think especially from a marketing lens, people follow people. They don't follow companies. And I think also social media does blur the lines. But, when I'm creating content, I know that my purely educational content, where I'm explaining how pre-tax 401k contributions are going to reduce your tax bill, or how to identify expense ratios in your 401k as an example. Those posts are helpful and interesting, but they generally get a lot less engagement than when I'm telling my personal story. And I also, for me, feel passionately, within certified financial planner practitioners, only 24% are women. Many fewer have young children. My compliance person who works with a big network that a lot of CFPs that are my peers are part of said that I am the first working mom that she has actually supported through compliance through this firm. And so I think that if I am putting myself in the shoes of my ideal client, and this is a lot of why I started this business as well. Most financial planners, if they're in their 60s or 50s and they're male and you're not, and you're trying to tell them, hey, I'm planning for IVF and that might be $75,000. That's an uncomfortable conversation to have
Yeah.
with somebody who doesn't get that. Or talking about childcare costs. Like, I was very disappointed, honestly, going through the certified financial planner practitioner curriculum that there was almost nothing about fertility, or there was literally nothing about fertility and almost nothing about childcare. There is stuff about saving for college, but there's so many other pieces to that.
Yeah.
And just last thing, you'll hear the excitement in my voice on this topic because I at one point had signed up for Personal Capital, which is now Empower. And as part of that, it's a great app where you can track all of your net worth and all your accounts. But they'll have an advisor call you to pitch you on working with them. And I was dating my now husband and we were long distance, and I was living in Texas, and we had sort of made a mutual decision. We were going to move to Boston. I'd lived in Boston before, and he is a scientist, so it was a better place for him to get a job. And I told the advisor who's pitching me my plan, and he goes, have you seen rental prices in Boston? You shouldn't move. And I was like, dude, I'm moving for my relationship. This is the man who's now the father of both of my children. And it was so out of touch with who I was and where I was in that stage of life that I think that personal piece can help you attract people who are in a similar stage of life, that you can understand the issues that they're dealing with, and that as a result, I can be a better advisor because I get it, and we can get into the planning more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this isn't to say, well, I don't know what to say. So, there's actually a story very locally to me that recently made national news. My husband's in the military, and we live in an extremely small town. When you're on a road trip and you're like, hey, like, are you hungry? Yeah, there's a fast food place 20 miles away. That's the small town I live in. Very, very small. And there's a military base. And I think it was just a week or two ago, the child care center on a military base, very little child care, put a notice out to 55 families that in 2 weeks their child would be disenrolled from childcare on the state. There has been panic in our local town for like the last 2 weeks of all these mothers, well, not mothers, and let's be honest, mostly mothers, looking for childcare in our small town because like resources. I mean, oh my gosh, yeah, moving rent is more expensive in Boston, but the resources available, I imagine, I mean, I don't know where you came from in Texas, but that's something to consider, childcare options. Um, all these families are having to consider, do I keep working? How am I going to afford rent in this town when I don't have anywhere to send my kid? Um, do I go for a childcare center, or do I hire a nanny or a sitter? There's all these things that, like, honestly, I hadn't really thought of too much. I thought I would just figure it out when, the kid comes along. Um, and yeah, I mean, having like someone in your ear, like just dripping those little, hey, you should be thinking about this, I'm sure is incredibly useful, uh, to women late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to hear that your community is going through that. That sounds very stressful. Um, and I
Yeah.
think that there is so much power in being able to plan and think through the financial piece of what it means to be a parent, even when you are a high earner, because it is a big source of stress. And you've talked about some of those issues, but buying a house, like making sure you leave room for childcare, or if you want to move from, again, I work a lot with women in medicine. If you want to go from 80% clinical to 60% clinical, could you do that? Because research generally pays less and still afford it. And what I'd meant to say before, and I feel like even you sharing that personal story maybe is an example of this, but I get much better engagement on my social media when I share things that are personal than when I just share, this is how pre-tax 401k contributions reduce your tax bill.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, people want to connect, and I see the same thing. Is that when I tell stories or something, it gives something for people to connect to, as opposed to another educational post when people probably aren't on social media for the educational stuff as much. But maybe something a little bit more lighthearted. I noticed you also post a lot of like memes and funny content on your channels. Have you ever gotten pushback to maybe be more professional?
I've never had anyone explicitly say that, but I've made a very conscious choice that my brand and one of the words that I want you to use when you think about me and my business and working with me, either taking a class or having me give a talk at your company or working with me as your planner, is that I want to be approachable. And I don't want to be the dusty, I'm throwing shade at Fidelity, but I don't want to be the dusty old guy from Fidelity who comes in to talk about your 401k and it's a snooze fest. Like, I want to meet people where they're at. And so I am not for everybody, and I'm not trying to be for everybody, but I want to be approachable. I'm not so young anymore, as I'm just turned 39, but, wanting to be someone who can appeal to a younger audience. Because again, I work with people who are early and mid-career. And so again, I'm not for everybody, but I think for the people who want to work with me and do choose to follow my socials, they probably appreciate that it's not boring traditional finance content.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of my clients maybe find themselves in a similar position where it's like they want to work with people that I'm more relaxed is maybe not the right word, but I don't know, more not Fidelity's clients. Which again, no shade to Fidelity, but yeah, but then they're like, and I'm like, well, why don't we, post some memes or funny reels, and that's where it's like, whoa, like, should I be more of the traditional accountant? Is that going to skew people's, view of me professionally? And yeah, I don't think it does at all. If anything, I think it just attracts people that you're more likely to connect with, and relate to.
Yeah.
But so tell me a little bit about, I've been following you on Instagram, but I also know that you're on LinkedIn. How does your messaging change from LinkedIn, where it is maybe a little bit more quote unquote traditional, to a more maybe playful platform like Instagram?
Yes. And I think that also relates to your question. I don't post memes on LinkedIn because
Yeah.
that's not the right place for it. And what I will often do, I'm trying to get a lot better about rinse and repeat with content and not making everything new because it is a lot of work to make content. And I do wish in a lot of ways that I had started more with SEO and less with Instagram, because you do have to feed Instagram constantly for it to be effective. But I'll give an example. I just did a post about driving my 2015 RAV4, which an example of a personal story, but answering a question I've been getting a lot from clients and students, which is, should I pay off my car with some of the cash that I have, or should I kind of, keep paying it off slowly over time? And maybe a second version of that question in a different context is, how much new car can I afford? How should I think about that? And so I kind of talked personally about my experience. My 2015 RAV4 just hit 10 years, or is about to hit 10 years at the end of the month. And so, what has not having a car payment for 5 years meant for my family? We're a one car family, and talking about my personal experience with that. When we shared it on Instagram, we did it as a reel with a lot of video from my life of me in that car, starting with just me, and then me and my dog, and then me and one baby, and then two. And on LinkedIn, I shared it in a different way where it wasn't a video or a reel like that. It was a still picture and a longer narrative piece. And so that's something actually ChatGPT, other AI tools can help you with adapting how to take a post that you make for one platform and revise it. But I'm able to get really good engagement. And then I actually wrote a newsletter that was even slightly different. And I do try to make my newsletters have one or two things at least that weren't in the social media posts so that people have a reason to subscribe. But I found that I got really good feedback through all three channels using the same content in slightly different ways.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, the right way to use AI, especially in marketing. And when it's like, you don't want to just say, hey, write me a social media post, ChatGPT. You took like a very original personal story, and then it sort of guided you on like the right route for each platform. That's awesome. I did have one last thing I wanted to ask you about, and that is if people are interested in learning more about personal finance. Like I said, I mean, I know a lot of the people listening right now are accountants, but we're really, I mean, as your bio said, we're really great with reading like business financial statements, but maybe we want a little bit of support when it comes to our own personal finances and more of the technical stuff around retirement and family planning and all those things. Where can people learn more?
Yeah. So first of all, would love for you to follow along on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I'm at her.personal.finance on Instagram, and on LinkedIn, it's my first name, Erin with a Y, and then Schultz. And so would love for you to connect there. You also could go to my website, which is herpersonalfinance.com. And I do have a bi-monthly newsletter there where I write about things like car payments and 401ks and student loans. And I'll also say that there's a lot of other great resources. One of my favorites is the White Coat Investor. It's a really big platform that is geared towards physicians, but has some really great personal finance content, and would be interesting, especially if anyone else is interested in serving people in medicine, to see what types of questions that audience has as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erin. It was a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, everyone be sure to check out Erin on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm going to share her handles and her website in the show notes, and you can learn more about her there. Thanks so much, Erin.
Thank you, Kristen.